Welcome to Act Out. I'm Eleanor Goldfield, and this is your tipping point. Last week, tragedy formed the overarching theme as two more black men fell to police brutality and systemic racism in gross execution-style killings. Then in Dallas, 5 cops were killed as they policed a peaceful protest. And let me be clear, all of this is disgusting. For all of those shouting and demanding that people take sides, this is the side. As reported by the Black Lives Matter Network, we advocate for dignity, justice, and respect, not murder. Being against the senseless killing of black men and women is not mutually exclusive from being against the killing of law enforcement, or kids at school, or kids in the Middle East, or people at a movie theater. It logically follows that if you are against the killing of any innocent, you are against the killing of all innocents. It also logically follows that we recognize the reality of the situation. Because while your TV oozes updates on the shooting of cops, black bodies are being targeted outside the lens of corporate media. Consider this. Nearly 600 people have died at the hands of police in the first half of this year alone. Meanwhile, so far in 2016, the Officer Down Memorial page counts 53 officers killed in the line of duty, 21 from gunfire. As Mark Lamont Hill explained on Democracy Now! Last Friday, we pray for all of them. I pray for their families. I want them to be okay. But I cannot allow that to detour me from a principled critique of state violence because far more people have died at the hands of law enforcement this year than died as law enforcement officers. We can and will push for justice while recognizing the importance of our nonviolent actions and tactics. We can and will condemn the senseless loss of life wherever it occurs, badge or no badge, and we will continue to call out the system that creates the environment where black lives are disproportionately placed in the crosshairs of injustice, greed, hate, and fear. And I say disproportionately because no life is immune. And with that, I'd like to introduce you to this week's first guest, YahNé Ndgo. You may recognize her from an appearance on CNN recently, where she schooled corporate news on the Bernie or bust mentality. But beyond that, she is a community-building creative activist that works in a wide range of spaces, including Black Lives Matter. I sat down with her last week after the deaths of Alton Sterling and Philando Castile. Here's her take on systemic racism, police brutality, solidarity work, social movements, and the upcoming DNC. Take a look.
It's really hard to know what to say at this point because, after what happened to Trayvon Martin, you had a lot to say. After what happened to Tamir Rice, you have a lot to say. After what happened to, it's like at a certain point, you're saying the same thing over and over again. It's really debilitating as just an individual. Like, I was actually, as I mentioned to you, working on pulling together the resources to fly out to Baton Rouge because I wanted to be there and be, just in solidarity with the community and that even though I'm not in that, don't live in that particular community, what happened there happened to me as well. Um, and then while I'm in the midst of that, I get a link, about what happened to Philando Castile. And then I'm like reeling from that. And then it's like, are you going to fly to Minnesota too? And then where are you going to be trying to fly to tomorrow? And so, it's very overwhelming and it's somewhat debilitating, especially with these last 2 incidents and how they happened. It's just like the thing that I keep asking is like, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to get up the next day and just make breakfast and just go to work and just like live a normal everyday life? Like, this is not happening every day. There's been over 500, close to 600 killings this year. And there's only 365 days in the year. We're only halfway through the year. So I'm at a loss for how I'm supposed to function in this kind of a society, how I'm supposed to be productive, how I'm supposed to trudge forward and accomplish things while I'm mourning the life of a different individual almost on a daily basis. And I don't, and then and adding to that is there's always somebody who's going to have something to say to try to diminish the significance of what it is that happened. There are always the people who wanted to say that it was Tamir Rice's parents' fault for letting him play with that gun, even though we have all kinds of videos of adult white men with actual real weapons and yielding them and pointing them at groups of officers, and somehow all of those officers managed to not think to shoot this man. But then you have a child in the park by himself, and we're supposed to, like, we are being you and I, not me and other Black people solely, but you and I as mutual human beings. We're supposed to look at these situations, and we're supposed to feel safe, and we're supposed to feel like we're a part of a caring and evolved society, and that we can trust the people who are supposed to be caring for us and representing our safety and our best interests. And we're supposed to just walk down the street and feel okay. That's what I don't understand. Like, I feel like we're a nation that is in post-traumatic stress disorder. That little girl, Diamond, she's supposed to just go and learn to write her letters, and she's supposed to just, learn to read and just go through kindergarten. She's supposed to just go and just have a normal life and then grow up and be perfectly productive and held to the standards of a person who actually lives in the society that we pretend we're a part of. It's baffling for me. I mean, I'm just really expressing my loss and my confusion. How am I supposed to just go on like nothing happened? These people's lives were destroyed. I don't understand what's expected of any compassionate person in this situation. How any person with any compassion at all is supposed to be functioning today. I don't understand that at all. How you supposed to just be okay right now? I just don't get that.
So I'm also curious because oh no please. I'm also curious because there was a comment on Twitter that I saw that said, this has been going on for hundreds of years. It's just that the cameras were turned on recently.
Right.
So I'm curious, why do you think that this movement has come out in the past couple of years after what happened to Trayvon Martin? Why was that a tipping point for this movement?
Well, I think for one thing, what happened with Trayvon Martin, even though it wasn't on camera, it was recorded. The difference is really the technology. The difference is that people have the ability now. I mean, there was that instance where that one man was stopped by police. He ran and was shot in the back, and then the police officer claimed that he had taken his taser. And if there weren't any cameras, if there weren't any footage, that would have been accepted and and believed. And he didn't know that he was being recorded, so he creates this story, which is what happens. And that's something that, I mean, I grew up knowing this. I grew up in a predominantly Black community. I remember I was a young adult the first time I encountered the idea that people actually trusted police, because that was just automatically, like, you didn't trust police. That was just what was the norm. And I mean, I was arrested when I was 18. Here in Philadelphia, there's a street called South Street, which is and one of the first areas around South Street was one of the first areas that was gentrified in Philadelphia, and it became like an upper white community. And so there was a period of time when the punk rockers used to hang out in mass down in that area, and they would just spend hours down there, and they would be sitting down, and they drink, and they do whatever other things they were doing. And during my teenage years, we discovered South Street, me and my friends, and so we started hanging out down there. And so the face of the hangout changed, but the activities were pretty similar, except that we weren't loitering as much. We would walk around and talk to each other, but they were uncomfortable. the community there. So next thing you know, police are hanging out with us and they're hurting us and they won't let us stop even just to talk to each other or stop in front of a store. And I got arrested for stopping. I was walking with my best girlfriend, um, and um, and we encountered some people we knew, and they stopped. You know, we were talking to them. We were going in opposite directions. We were talking, and the police came over, and they were like, you know, you got to keep it moving, keep it moving. So in the midst of us trying to wrap up our conversation, one of the officers pushes me to keep it moving. And I come off my slipper, my sandal, and I'm trying to put my sandal on. And I like, can I get my sandal on? Kind of, you know, attitude. Next thing I know, I'm getting arrested. And I ended up having to apologize to that police officer in order to not have a record. But this is just normal. This is normal in our community. And, you know, I'll give you another example. My growing up in the high school, I went to Cheltenham High School, and there was an area that there was a big apartment complex there called Linwood Gardens. It's still there, and there were a lot of Korean people that lived in that community, as well as a lot of Black people that lived in that community. And there was like a group of Black guys that used to hang out on one area, and across the street, because there were these long lawns, so they would be at the back of the lawn in one area, and across the street was the group of Korean kids, and we were friendly with all of them. And the Korean kids would sit there as the cops would pull up, park, go to the Black kids, harass them, check them for drugs and everything, then get back in their car and pull off. They never bothered the Korean kids who actually had drugs on them. They were actually selling drugs. They were selling weed. It was not anything major, but they never even bothered them. And they never bothered to hide it because they knew they weren't going to be a target. And so, you know, the fact that that it happens and that it's targeted towards, you know, our community and certain communities more than others, those are realities that we've always lived with. The technology is what's making the difference. That she was able to live stream that, even the difference between her being there, because if she had simply recorded it, they took her phone. You know, no one would know this had happened right now. That technology is what's making the huge difference in our ability now to say it and have that backed up and have it harder to challenge. Of course, everyone still wants to challenge it, but it being much harder to challenge now than it would have been, several years ago. You know, and I also, you know, and this, some people might not agree with this idea, but I feel like that officer, like, he's a victim in a way in this situation as well, because we live in a society that consistently programs everyone to be afraid of Black people. It, you know, I mean, like the super predator comment, right? Like this language is placed in the minds of individuals, and it creates this impression, and this fear is placed within everyone. Everyone in our American society is inundated with these ideas of who Black people are, being superhuman as far as having extra strength and extra power, but being subhuman in our ability to be rational and make normal decisions, being superhuman in our relationship with pain, you know, and our need for help and support. All of these things affect how people are handled by police officers and by people in the medical field. You know, studies show that if a Black man comes in with an ailment where he's in pain, he's less likely to be treated for that pain, because there's this idea that Black people are super strong, superhuman, right? So, you know, this man who's been inundated with these ideas is now confronted with a Black man who has a gun. And the fact that he told him that he was doing what he's supposed to do, this man's fear took him over. And now he has turned into and become a murderer. He's got, like, this man has to live with that as well. You know, may have to die for that. You know, but our society created that and implanted that in him. And we have to take responsibility as a whole for like how we're messaging to to the people in our communities. What we're telling them, there are people who never meet Black people until they're adults in our country, even today. But they've been learning all of these weird things. I met a woman when I was in my 20s who thought that Black people had tails until she met them. Like, this is what she believed. She confessed this to me. She thought first time she met a Black person in person, she thought that our complexion could rub off. Like the stuff that you hear from like in like the 1800s, like this, people still think this way. People are still being told these things. So what are they going to do? Like if you were running and somebody pulled up and there was a wild lion in the car, you're going to be, you're going to react in a certain kind of a way. And if this is how you've been taught to perceive this section of humanity, what are you going to do? We're creating a horrible, horrible societal environment for all of the people involved through this messaging.
So in that same vein, what do you feel the role of white allies in this movement should be, and how can white people that are with the Black Lives Matter movement, how can they best combat what you're talking about?
Well, I think there are so many things that people can do, but I think one of the big things, is that I think white liberals have to start being intentional about giving things up. There's this automatic idea, right, that white culture is the hierarchical culture, right? That the intellectual heritage starts in Europe, right, where white people come from, and so um, there's a right way to do everything, and that was established within the European communities, and so everything that happens and moving forward is within this protected environment. And so, for example, I got my MFA um, in creative writing and literature from an awesome program that's predominantly white, and in the effort to affect that, we started a diversity initiative. And the administration, they told me that they were very aware of how white the community and the program was, and that they had been consistently were trying to address that, but they had not been very successful at it. But they still wanted to take over the process of figuring out how to address it, even though they clearly didn't know how. I mean, either they were lying, which I don't think they were, when they said that they were trying to address it, or they couldn't let go of the idea that they were the ones who knew better, even though they obviously didn't. And then there was the reality that, like, when we talked about the curriculum and we talked about introducing and bringing in all different kinds of literature, they they were troubled. Like, how do we do this and still make sure everybody has that foundation that they need of of the fundamentals of literature, but they couldn't question whether or not what they perceive as the fundamentals are actually that, right? You have to be willing to let some things go. You have to be willing to let some spaces go. You can't necessarily hire your homegirl who you love, even though she's awesome. She's an awesome author. You can't always just hire her to be in these positions. You're going to have to give up some of those positions to people of color. You're going to have to also, there was one Black man in that program the whole time I was there, and it was a 2-year program, but I also stayed on for a couple of years as the lead of this diversity initiative. And this one Black man was became a source of fear for certain members of the community. They felt threatened. They thought he was going to bring a gun and shoot up the community. It's not even like anything very typical of, that's not how Black people tend to function, right? But, you know, and this guy, he went to Harvard, he went to Sarah Lawrence. And one of the things that he talked about, he's like, I'm really tired of having to always turn myself off, my Blackness off, my culture off, to not scare and to fit in. Like, why can't they have to deal with and adjust to how we do things? He was, they were afraid of him because he had been quoting some Tupac lyrics. And so they weren't familiar. Now, if he had, run off and said some Shakespearean stuff, and, communicating his feelings that way, then that would have been cool. Same kind of messaging, but something that they're more familiar with. But he has to always be, in that white space, right? So these are some of the kinds of things, like just understanding these in a nuanced way, that you have to give some stuff up and you have to like move out of the way, and make room for other communities completely. Like you don't just bring in the bodies and say, now come act like us. You bringing in the bodies, you're bringing in their intellect, our intellect, you're bringing in our culture, and you have to figure out how to include all of that in this process, or you're going to keep on just seeing things in the way that they confront white culture and the difference in how they confront white culture is what I heard was happening in Oakland. White liberals were moving into Oakland and then getting upset because the church music is too loud or because of the drum circle or seeing black men, doing deliveries and calling police on everybody. Why are you moving into this community and then making the assumption that the way that you do things all the time is the only way things are supposed to be done? So now that you've implanted yourself into this other community, you want to change and transform the way everyone there does everything. You have to adjust. You're coming in here. Come here because you like it and then enjoy it and expand yourself. And then the people there will also listen and hear your music and be like, oh, that song is pretty cool too. We can learn and grow, but you're not going to do that if you're constantly trying to just impose what you understand and you don't even realize you're doing it because you have just taken and embraced this assumption that the way that you taught was the right way is actually the only way and the only right way.
With regards to the upcoming Democratic convention and election, I know that you've been very prominent in the Bernie or Bust movement. I want to hear what your thoughts are on next steps for the movement, and in particular things like Michelle Alexander's quote about Clinton not deserving the black vote.
Well, I think that that's true. I mean, obviously, I'm Bernie or Bust, so I'm definitely not giving her my vote under any circumstances. I think that Hillary Clinton embodies is funny because there's all of this like, oh, Trump's so terrible, which I think Trump pretty much he sucks. But Hillary Clinton embodies through her actions the very things that he says. So he speaks all of this anti-Muslim rhetoric, but her foreign policy is the destruction of so many Muslim people's lives and the destabilization of the Muslim parts of our world, the predominantly Muslim parts of our world. He speaks anti-Hispanic, anti-Latino, but when you look at what she's done in lower parts of the Americas, I mean, she has actually done the things that he says he would like to see done. So what really, I mean, the difference between the two of them is he's talking, she's action. I mean, he's not that he hasn't done his own, he's taken advantage of individuals but the destruction of, I mean, she's destroyed whole countries. She's destroyed whole countries. And in every place that she's done it, the people are black and brown. And then, with the insistence of the welfare reform after the Clintons received a study saying how many more children were going to be impoverished and which community, if any, does that affect the most, and it's still moving forward with that because that moved forward the neoliberal, agenda and moved her forward within that community at the expense of so many people's lives. And again, using the language and perpetuating the ideas that keep this police state mentality when police come into black communities. Like this is her legacy. So I feel very strongly that her presidency is a terrible idea. And it's my intention to support individuals in being able to stay strong and firm in their convictions around making a choice to vote in the way that they believe in, whatever it is that happens. Like, you can't take responsibility for if Donald Trump was to become the president. First of all, for someone like me, it's that's not like a threat because the alternative is Hillary Clinton. So, but we can't take responsibility for all of that. Like, I'm not responsible for the fact that Hillary Clinton is probably going to be the Democratic nominee. I didn't vote for her. That's not my fault. And if she loses, it's not going to be because of me. It's going to be because because the Democratic National Committee did not handle the election in a way that was fair and proper. And so the people who would have wanted to vote for Bernie either were not allowed to because of these random rules, or did not know enough because they kept information away until after a lot of primaries had already passed. Or, there was so many, that's going to be the reason if Donald Trump becomes the president. But I'm going to do my best to make sure neither one of them become the president. And I know that's a tough thing to do, but that's what I believe in. And so for me, I'm going to keep doing what feel has integrity within the context of my heart. And, and so to me, voting for Hillary Clinton is kind of like, it speaks against the reality of what happened to Trayvon Martin and Tamir Rice and Sandra Bland. It speaks against what happened to Berta Cáceres. It speaks against what's happening to all of the people who are trying to get out of Syria, and to what happened in Europe, and because of all of the Syrian refugees that were pouring through their borders, and how that impacted people's lives and it impacted people's thinking, and this Brexit thing. Like, all of this is a part of her legacy. I'm not able to support any of that. So, I fight against that. But I also support movements to empower another party or additional parties. And I support the focus on the 2018 and 2020 elections. I'm certainly supporting all of the marches and rallies and efforts, to still influence the Democratic nominee process or nominating process, and encourage people to just continue to fight. Today I've been very disheartened, and had a lot of difficulty being productive. If it weren't for the fact that you and I were going to talk today, I could still be wallowing in my bed really right now. But ultimately, I am a fighter, and I'm going to keep working to accomplish my personal vision of a world of complete equity that is without any poverty, and that is built on compassion, and that is founded in the principle of Ubuntu, which says there is no me without you.
So with that, because that touches upon what I wanted to talk about here finally, is your work focuses on the intersection of creativity and socio-political movements, and the idea of community is very strong. And you mentioned when you were discussing Bernie or Bust, it's regardless of what happens, it's about building the movements. And on your site, it says creating experiences, programs, and projects that transform communities. Talk about this concept of building movements and building community, and why that is really, regardless of an election year, why is that the most important thing at hand?
Well, I believe that the majority of people are ready for this world that I just described, right? Where everyone is even even the people who are like have these racist ideas. I think even like the most liberal people still have racist ideas because we can't help it, right? Because again, the programming. Regardless of where people are coming from, I think most people believe that, ideologically, that there's equality of humanity and that everyone should be eating. And I think we're ready to create that world, and that we have all of the resources and technology that that will make it possible. And the only thing that's preventing it is our separation, right? So this idea that that police brutality, for instance, is what happened to me. That the idea that it should be lamented more. What happened to Philando Castile should be lamented more by me as a Black woman than by you as a white woman, or that just that these separations are real. That what happens on the other side of the border is not my concern. Like, these ideas, these are the things that are keeping us from bringing that world together. Or to fruition, but as we come together, we will be able to overcome and transcend these ideas. And, and even if we can't do it inside of ourselves fully, like in our subconscious and fully, we can do it through our actions. Like, we can challenge ourselves through our actions and our activities to create something that's different and to prevent that programming from getting into our young people, and programming them with messages of compassion, of Ubuntu, of love. And it has to be done from like a groundswell effort. Like, all of these things that are happening is happening to all of us, is holding all of us back, but we see it as separate, and it stops us from moving forward. So my goals are just to engage people in dialogue and activities that help each of us to move above these ideas of our differences and really connect with the resonance of our shared humanity. And I use the term the living race, because we are also connected to the trees, and we're also connected to the earth. And um, and as we begin to see ourselves that way and experience ourselves that way, the world automatically begins to change and transform as well with us. It's so much harder to be harmful to someone who you are looking at and you're seeing yourself in them. And so that's my goal, is to build things that help people to really get to that basic human connected reality, and to make decisions from that place. And whatever I can do to make that happen is what I want to do. Whatever, and that's where the creativity comes in, because I'm an artist, I'm a writer, I'm a singer, I'm a performer, but I think creatively. I just don't, I don't, I just am. What else is there? What other way is there? I'm an ideas person, and so I'm just constantly trying to be creative around how do we pull people together, connect people, empower people, make sure people realize that they are empowered, amplify their voices. That's what the role of artists are, really. That's why it's called creativity, because you're supposed to be a creator, and we have to create that best world. And so that's what my work is about, is pulling people together, helping them realize that they can do it if they don't, or helping to support and amplify the efforts that they are doing if they already know that they can and are trying, and connecting people with others who are doing the same.
For more information on YahNé and her work, visit bluewomen.com and follow her on social media at YahNé Ndgo.